We are told today that the British crown is merely a symbol, a golden ornament, a relic of the medieval past with no real teeth and no true political power. The modern king reigns, but he does not rule. He signs what he is told to sign, and he smiles when he is told to smile. But 300 years ago, the reality in the heart of London was terrifyingly different. One woman, broken by unimaginable personal grief and trapped in a swollen, dying body, held the absolute fate of a global empire in her fading hands. This is the dark, untold story of Queen Anne, the last true sovereign of Great Britain, and the very last monarch who possessed the terrifying power to defy the politicians. To truly understand the dark weight of the crown that Anne wore, we must look at how she obtained it. Her journey to the throne was not a peaceful transition. It was paved with the cold, unforgiving stones of family betrayal. In the year 1688, during the chaotic upheaval known as the Glorious Revolution, Anne made a choice that would haunt her conscience until her final breath. She turned her back on her own father, King James II, conspiring secretly with his bitterest enemies to overthrow his regime. She watched in silence as her own father was hunted like an animal and forced into permanent exile across the sea, all so that the crown could eventually find its way to her head. It was a crown bought with the high price of family loyalty, and history would ensure she paid a heavy, bloody price for it. By the time she officially took the throne in the year 1702, Great Britain was a volatile powder keg of political war, religious division, and global conflict. But Queen Anne was no weak placeholder, nor was she a puppet for the Lords. In the freezing winter of 1708, Queen Anne did something that no British monarch has ever dared to do in the 3 centuries since. A highly controversial law regarding the Scottish militia had successfully passed through both Houses of Parliament, backed by the country's most ruthless and powerful politicians. They expected the Queen to simply nod, sign the parchment, and obey their wishes. But Anne refused. Standing proudly before the powerful lords, she invoked the ancient Royal Veto, completely crushing the legislation with a single stroke of her pen. It was a historic, thunderous display of absolute royal supremacy. It was also, tragically, the very last breath of true monarchical power before the prime ministers permanently took the keys to the kingdom. Yet, this absolute political power came with a horrific, almost supernatural personal curse. While Anne ruled an empire spanning the globe, her private life inside the cold, dark walls of the palace was a non-stop waking nightmare. To secure the royal Protestant line and save her country from civil war, Anne spent her entire adult life pregnant, desperate for just one single heir to survive and inherit the realm. Tragically, between 1684 and 1700, she suffered 17 devastating miscarriages, stillbirths, and tragic childhood deaths. 17 times the lonely, weeping queen had to watch her own flesh and blood perish. 17 times she had to bury her children in the dark, freezing royal vaults of Westminster Abbey. Her only son to survive infancy, Prince William, died at just 11 years old, permanently shattering her last hope. Each loss broke her spirit further, leaving her isolated, severely depressed, riddled with agonizing gout, and eventually so dangerously overweight that she was completely unable to walk without assistance. As her health rapidly failed, the shadows inside St. James's Palace grew longer and more dangerous. Anne's private court became a battleground for one of the most ruthless psychological wars in British history. Unable to govern alone due to her physical agony, she relied deeply on her childhood friend Sarah Churchill, the Duchess of Marlborough. It was an intense, passionate, and deeply manipulative relationship that bordered on royal scandal. Sarah controlled the Queen's household, using her extreme proximity to the throne to enrich her family and dictate national wartime policy. But as Anne grew tired of Sarah's cruel bullying and arrogant demands, a new rival emerged from the dark shadows. Abigail Masham, a lower-born cousin, used flattery and quiet manipulation to win the Queen's favour. the vast British Empire was effectively governed by the whispers, jealousies, and toxic betrayals of these three women in the royal bedchamber, a dark game of power that left the Queen utterly broken, confused, and alone. By the hot summer of 1714, the lonely Queen could fight no longer. Betrayed in her final days by her closest female confidants, abandoned by the ambitious politicians, and completely consumed by a lifetime of profound grief, Queen Anne died at the age of 49. Her body was so swollen from disease that she had to be buried in a vast, strangely square coffin just to fit her remains in the royal tomb. With her final breath, the active, roaring power of the British crown died too. The German Georges were brought in from overseas to inherit the throne, and royal power was permanently handed over to Parliament. Today, palace guards at Windsor Castle whisper that her tragic phantom still wanders the historic halls. A weeping queen in a black velvet dress, forever trapped in a time when the crown truly ruled. When the thick London fog rolls over the River Thames tonight, remember Queen Anne, the monarch who held absolute power over an empire but lost absolutely everything.